Hi, everybody. Jackie Woodside here again, the founder of the Conscious Living Summit. And I could not be more excited for the conversation that I'm about to have with you today. Dennis Pitocco from Florida is someone who I was introduced to by a friend, a colleague, a mutual friend that we have, who said to me when she heard about my Conscious Living Summit, "Oh, you've got to interview this guy, Dennis, my friend Dennis, because he's a guy who is out there living life consciously." So I've since had, a few months now of getting to know Dennis, doing some work with him, doing some collaborative writing and publishing with him, which has just been extraordinarily pleasant. And you don't always say that in the publishing industry these days. So hats off to you, Dennis, for that. So welcome to the Conscious Living Summit. Thank you for your time and your energy and your commitment to living consciously and raising consciousness on the planet. Do you mind, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this dialogue is because exactly what our mutual friend Temple said, you are someone who's living consciously. So can you just tell our listeners a little bit about that? How did you end up in this space of consciousness and conscious living? And let's just start there.
Great question. Thanks for having me, Jackie. It's just a pleasure to share the story. The high level story goes like this. My wife is British. I met her over in Europe. I traveled the world for many years. I was in banking, mergers and acquisition, a completely different line of work. I mean, there's a lot of learning experiences from that I bring to what we do today. And my wife was in a different line of work, traveling the world in a different way. We met over in England because of what we were doing. I was fortunate enough to sell my company over there, come back here to Tampa Bay. And fortunate and blessed because we both technically retired early, but never really retired. We were just too young. We were too young.
All right, no worries whatsoever. So what about what was happening? Your wife selling the company and
right. We ended up selling our business in Europe, came back to Tampa, and the best analogy I can say to you, Jackie, is it's like the dog that's chasing the car. We caught the proverbial car at a young age. The question then becomes, now you have the blessings or the opportunity to do what you want with your life from that point forward. Tough choices to make. Very few people have it. So we really understand how blessed we were. And we sat and we had long talks and saying, how do we want to spend our time now? Yeah. We obviously were out of the corporate world altogether and we had no intention of going back to that. We started trying to figure out.
Can I just hop in right there, Dennis, before you go to the next phase? Because there's so much here that I don't want to step over.
Okay.
All right. So first of all, to me, part of conscious living, you haven't said this, but it's my job to kind of cull out the nuggets, right, of these conversations. So to me, part of living consciously is someone who is, attaining really extraordinary things and yet is very humble about it. So the way that you are talking about even just this part of the story, oh, by the way, I was in, England and I had this international company and, oh, yeah, I sold it. Oh, gee, lucky me, And the way that you're talking about it is so, it's so humble. And I think that kind of humility is really a part of conscious living. I can hear in the way that you're speaking that you're not being driven by ego. The way that I can just imagine this story being told a whole different way, right? Yeah, my wife and I cashed out early. I really worked my butt off, made that company, whatever. I did that and I was able to sell it. And none of that in you. There's this very gentle humility about an extraordinary accomplishment that many people would just dream about. And you did it, and you and your wife, and you created this company, you built it up, you created it as an asset that you then sold, which then set you into this extraordinary freedom of choice, which doesn't always, freedom of choice does not mean freedom from the ego. So what you're saying next then is we sat down and had some long talks because we had nothing but time in front of us. Okay, like you have to nobody does that. Most men who have, kind of close up their business or retire end up dying of a heart attack within 3 to 6 months after because they've got nothing to live for.
Good point. Very good point. Thank you.
So I just didn't want to step over that because everything you're saying is so indicative of what it means to live consciously. And I really want to invite our readers to dive into that. What's your narrative about what you've achieved so far? How do you ask yourself, how am I going to spend my time? Maybe you don't have the time freedom that Dennis and his wife were blessed to have back at that juncture, but we still all have to grapple with that question. How am I going to live this one precious life? And what you've said so far is just you dive into that question and live it very consciously with your wife. So well, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that was just so rich. Right. I didn't want to step over it.
Thank you so much for your kind words here. Never looked at it from that perspective, but thank you, because I'm going to borrow that word. We were very conscious of, number one, we were blessed, and that we had some very important choices to make. And everybody says, when I retire, I'm going to go travel. Well, that was part of it.
Yeah,
we decided after a lot of very thoughtful discussions that we wanted to kind of carve out our time in three ways.
Okay.
Number one, I mentioned the word travel. Well, we both traveled in business, like you travel, Jackie, but traveling on business is, you never really see where you're going necessarily.
Yeah,
I can tell you, for example,
the inside of the airport, right?
Right. And you see the taxi and you see the meter. I can tell you, I have been to South Korea. People say, oh, you've been to South Korea. I said, yeah, but I never saw it.
Right.
And I can name countries. So we said, and we both enjoyed traveling independently, but it was all business driven. We said, all right, look, we're going to take a chunk of our time and we're going to travel intentionally. What does that mean? That means we're going to discover the rest of the world before we discover America, because we want to get a perspective on the rest of the world that we only have now through the television. So we're going to do that. So next thing is, whatever we do in the next two things, we decided we want to be able to maintain the travel. Well, the next thing came, we want to keep our brains active. Well, then came the idea of building a website. Now you're talking to guys, no background in publishing, no background in building websites. And the difference was we were going to build it our way, and we were going to learn from scratch how to do it without all the technology people. The theory was, we want to build something, Jackie, that we don't mind going to in the morning and turning on. And it feels the kind of welcoming that you may not get if you say to a technical guy, go build me a website. He comes back and says, this is what everybody wants. Well, no.
Right.
So that was designed. So that was how we're going to keep our brain active, knowing that if we're traveling, we can still maintain a website.
Yeah.
The third piece is, and this is something that was near and dear to both of us. And when we got married and moved over here back to Tampa, we said, we both have a real heart for nonprofits and giving back. Because of our jobs, we could never really walk that talk. We had to, you could always write a check, but we wanted to get out there and volunteer. We wanted to be in those international disasters. We wanted to say, let's just tell us where you need us to go.
Yep.
We'll find our way there. How can we help in the trenches, not behind the scenes? So we decided we were going to devote time to that end. Well, that was the third piece. So we were conscious of and clearly aware of what was important to us back then.
Yeah.
Our choices then intended to three things. We're going to do what we do for good, and that's time, talent, and treasure. And nothing is going to be connected to economics. And that'll get more into the story of 360 Nation, because everything we do under that umbrella of 360 Nation is there's no economics involved. There are no money change. There's no promotion. There's no advertising. Everything is done for good. And we are serious about walking the talk. That began to distinguish us from so many other businesses. And we're coming up on our 10th anniversary soon. And I'm happy to say we have been able to live that through the entire 10 years of 360 Nation.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So anything you want to add to that about your path and your process? So what is 360 Nation for people who are familiar with
that's I kind of tease with it. 360 Nation is, for lack of a better term, kind of an umbrella, because we started doing so many things down that path of doing good that, quite frankly, we were moving fast. Why? Because we were building it ourselves so we can react and change and move and shift. And over the 10 years, people started wondering, who are we and what are we going to be when we grow up? So we finally said, look, we're going to put everything under what we believe in, and that's called 360 Nation. But the tagline is more important, and it's humanity rediscovered. Our mission from day one was, we know humanity's still out there. Over the recent years, it's harder and harder to find. Yeah. So we're going to do everything we can to rediscover it through the writing that we publish, through the events that we participate in, through our nonprofit work. So 360 Nation morphed into three things once again. Number one, maybe that magic number three again. We built a website called BizCatalyst 360 that became a portal to the world. 10 years ago, nobody knew it existed. Today, it's one of the major media websites out there. We've got over 800 writers on all and across all the continents except Antarctica. We published over 25,000 articles now. That morphed into our next venture, which was, well, we want to give back to nonprofits. And let me tell you, we did everything you could. We've been delivering meals for years. I've been serving on boards now. My wife's doing a lot of independent work, everything we've been doing for nonprofits. But we said, we are so blessed that in the Tampa Bay, it's a very nice place to be a nonprofit because there's a lot of big corporates here and they can sponsor you. But what if you're in Boise, Idaho, or Mumbai, India? So we said, wait a minute, now we have the technology and we know how to do a website. Why don't we launch another business? And this was 3 years ago. We ended up launching what we call a sister website that a lot of people don't know about, but you'd see it if you went onto our main website. It's called GoodWorks 360. Now, the entire mission of GoodWorks 360 is we can now reach out to any good, and I underline the word good, any good nonprofit anywhere in the world and say, if you need help, we can help you virtually through all the tools that are out there, and you will never receive an invoice.
That's fabulous.
So what we did is we went out to all of our contacts and connections we made through building the first website and said, here's what we're doing. Here's what it's about. It's all for good. Would anybody like to help? I'm happy to say that as of now, we have over 4 dozen top tier professionals like you, Jackie, spread around the world that have said, look, we've always wanted to give back too, but unlike you, Dennis, we're not retired, or so to speak. We're still doing things. We've got family, but we can always give our time. So now we have all these people that have stepped up and said, we will give our time to anyone that you direct us to. It's 3 years later. We've now had about almost 40 engagements around the world, strangely enough, as far away as Mumbai, India. And through this kind of technology, through text, through email, the technology keeps getting better, and we're changing lives around the world.
So that was doing nonprofit consulting. Is that what?
That's exactly what it is. So any nonprofit that needs any help to help them run their nonprofit, beyond the volunteers, they can come to us, and that's been a really satisfying part of our operation, which connects back to humanity being rediscovered in another way. The third thing we did that completed the 360 Nation, I shouldn't say completed it because we keep morphing, but last year, we're taking another one of those walks where we made our original decision, Jackie, and we walked every morning around our neighborhood here. And it was August of last year, and we're walking and we're looking and we're saying, that was probably the darkest part of what we believe to be the pandemic period. We were about 6 months into it almost. Yeah. There weren't a lot of glimmers of hope. People were being locked down around the world. And I said to my wife, I said, things are so dark out there. And yet here we sit, we're in the Tampa sunshine. We've got this marvelous portal to the world. We've got to find a way to do something bigger, better, scarier, and maybe braver than we've ever done. And that's where the idea came that we're going to launch what we call 360 Nation Studios, and we're going to put together a streaming video that we're going to share with the world. Now, let me back up. We had no experience in that at all. But we had, let me tell you, we've had faith because we've learned if you do enough good, and I'm going to use your word again, conscious good, I do believe the good karma comes back around. So I said, there's enough good people out there. So here's what we're going to do, and I'll keep this short. Tomorrow morning, we're going to write to anybody that we know, writers, people that we're connected on around the world, and say, look, here's what we want you to do. We'd like you to send us a video. And Jackie, if I was speaking to you, I say, Jackie, would you please just answer the following question? No rehearsal, just off the top of your head. Right, Jackie, what do you hope for in the future? And then just turn on the camera and send us a video. We don't care how short it is, how long. Yep. Now, Jackie, we did that in late August. We didn't know what to expect. We thought, well, maybe we'll get a dozen videos and then we'll figure out the YouTube thing. Well, on January 1st of this year, and it was purposely timed for when New Year's entered the first country in the world. That happened to be Christmas Island over there by New Zealand.
Nice.
We released this video, and what we thought would be a dozen turned out to be 153 videos. The production was 8 hours long. It included over 24 musicians around the world that heard what we were doing, and they were trapped in that same pandemic with no audience, no studios.
Right.
And they contributed music. We ended up getting a Grammy nominee. We had 2 nonprofits from around step up, and they recorded people singing from their nonprofits, which in that case happened to be an Alzheimer Foundation.
Nice.
So this thing morphed into this massive production, and we realized that we had the power then to touch people through another medium, and that was January 1st. And I mean, it's been remarkable. As of this morning, it's had over 30,000 views, and we continue to get the messages that came out of that. When you ask somebody in India or Pakistan or America or South America, what is hope? What do you hope for the future? The answers were so remarkably different.
Wow.
It's culture. It's where you are in your life. It's where you are in your personal world. And we learned so much from it. It was remarkable. So that launched 360 Nation Studios. And just a quick update on that, it went so well. And we felt about a month or 2 ago, another morning walk, said, things are looking a little up now. The world's opening a little bit. You can see the sunshine. That was called Hope Fest 360. The idea was to get people to stop looking down and look up a little bit. So a month ago, we launched our latest call for videos, and it's called Bucket Fest. And now the idea is to get people to look forward by saying, Jackie, what's on your bucket list?
Yeah.
And now we're doing that, and that's in production. And we've got now about 130 videos. We got all these new musicians coming in. We got nonprofits coming back. And I'm just so excited to tell you, we got our first video from mainland China, which is hard to do. And most importantly, this week, we got a video from what can best be described as an orphanage in Mexico. We've got videos of 11 little children talking about what's on their wish list or bucket list. Just remarkable.
That's beautiful. I want to pull out another piece that, again, you're not saying it, but I want to cull this from what you're saying. Conscious living isn't just about me. Conscious living, your focus, Dennis, is so outward. It's extraordinary to me how you're really looking, where can I touch? Where can I make a difference? Not just in your family, in your home, not even just in your community. You're looking around the world, and that's extraordinary to me.
Well, we like to say that it's not an occupation, it's an occupation.
Right. I'm going to ask you to hold that 1 second. So I have to ask you, because I do see your focus being so outward, humanity rediscovering. Is that the word?
Yep.
Humanity rediscovering. And I love that outward focus and how conscious you are about making a contribution. Dennis, you and your wife could have, I don't know, let's say bought an island and flown in a chef and had a masseuse come and tend to you, and had your friends come and play pickleball or whatever, jet skied around your private island back when you made this choice. What drove you to, rather than just, kind of creating this comfortable, luxurious existence where you and maybe some family and friends ride it out into the sunset, doing what you want to be doing, traveling the world and drinking martinis, and I don't know, like whatever, what was behind this for you?
Well,
the motivating factor?
I wish I could answer that easily. It's more about, and I'm going to overuse the word blessed, but we just felt so fortunate and saying, can we waste? Do we want to waste? And we both had a lot of energy, and we both had the spirit of giving back before we even met. So how do you mix all that?
Yeah.
And have the luxury of then saying, okay, now what am I going to do with it and do for good? Now, the other side of that, it creates a hurdle that we have to continue to jump, which is a good thing, which means I don't want to just say to Jackie, we're the rediscovering humanity. We have to walk that talk every day, because people then begin to ask, what does that really mean? Well, that means being more compassionate. That means being a better listener. That means just showing more kindness. And I can go down a list of 100 things. And that's the virtue that we embrace. And I'm conscious that you can't just speak that, you have to do it. And that becomes the litmus test for everything I've told you. We're not going to do a production if it just feels good. We're going to do it because we know we can change lives. Because Jackie, when you watch a video from these kids in Mexico, you're going to say, wow, aren't I fortunate? What can I do for organizations like that? And And,
I mean,
just the messages coming from people's hearts has the ability to positively change lives. So it's
so
a kind of a
powerful.
long-winded answer, and there's no
No, it's
easy one,
not.
you
It's not
know?
at all. So you have, again, you're not using this language, but you have a real clear sense of what your values are
Mm,
around contribution and, having your blessings be given back, giving back. I like what you said about time, talent, and treasure.
yeah.
And you're being really conscious about how you're using those gifts. So again, when I think about my hope for each of these interviews is that our listeners will be taking notes and really thinking about their own lives. So I'll ask, our listeners right now this question: how are you using those three T's of time, talent, and treasure? Are you bringing them within, or are you giving them out? And the other thing that I want people to reflect on that I'm hearing in this interview with Dennis is how clear he and his wife were and how aligned, right? So there's some real good marriage advice there. My
Amen.
spouse and I
Amen.
talk a
Amen.
lot about that, how
Amen.
fortunate we are that we are so aligned in our values and what a difference that makes in our marriage. And it
Well,
sounds like,
I agree, Jackie, because the best analogy is, let's assume that I was a meat and potatoes guy and my wife was a complete vegan.
yeah, yeah,
We live in different worlds. So everything I've
yeah,
said would not have been possible had we
right,
not been aligned together.
right.
And, it's like that silent language. We don't have to say anything to each other. We just know.
Yeah,
And our litmus test has always been pretty simple. Are we doing good, and are we doing the right thing at the same time? Which, if you put it through that funnel,
yeah,
it keeps you from veering off course, because there are always opportunities. Well, maybe somebody say, well, you could make a lot of money, you can sell that, or you can promote. We don't do that,
yeah.
but it's always tested, and it's tested all the time, because that's the world we live in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is the definition of living consciously. So you were clear on what you valued and you made decisions, you and your wife both, in alignment with what you value. Imagine, again, I really play this out that if you had these values for contribution, but you're like, well, I don't know, I don't really know how we can make a difference. We can write a check here and there, and you went off living some other life. The disalignment, the lack of integrity that would then bring into your experience in life, I think you'd be miserable. So this is one of the blessings of living a conscious life, is that you get to be so happy being who you are, doing what you do. And it may not look like what Dennis is doing. I think you have a really unique life, a unique business model that not a lot of people will be able to mimic, so to speak, but anyone can cull the principles that you are talking about, apply it to their lives, and elevate their consciousness.
Thank you. I think that is possible. We have a technical term that very few people use. It's got to pass what we call the icky test.
What does that mean?
If it feels icky, we shouldn't be doing it.
If it
Which,
feels like you don't be doing it. Yeah.
it's like saying, Jackie, people say, well, you should always do the right thing. People have said to us, well, how do you know what it is? I said, look, once you get to the age of reason, if not sooner, whether you admit it or not, you know what the right thing is. Mom and dad may tell you to do something, but you know what the right thing is, and let that be your compass.
Yeah.
And so if it's icky, it's not following the right thing path. And, I hate to use those big technical terms, but that's what we use.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a lot of wisdom in that. But again, you have to be fairly conscious in order to be able to feel that, like, that's kind of icky. It doesn't feel right for us.
Amen.
So that's how you make a lot of your decisions. Does it feel right? Does it pass the icky test?
Right.
And what about, do you have days or hours or moments where you just feel like you're off that path, off that sense of connection to your kind of higher self, higher purpose?
Rarely do we have that, because we're just, we wake up excited about what we're doing. It's not a job. I mean, we can make choices that other people can't make. But I'll tell you what, where we are where we are likely to veer off path or encounter situations where it just is icky. We're going down this path and we chose to go down, but it's feeling a little icky. And I'll tell you where that comes in. It's in helping the nonprofits I mentioned earlier, where, we study the nonprofit. We may get an inquiry from South America somewhere. And as long as there are no language barriers, we move forward. We do a little bit of diligence to make sure the money goes where it's supposed to,
Yep.
and all that. And then we look at their mission, and then we start down the path. All right, they need help in social media. They need help in operations. Where we tend to occasionally bump into a hurdle that we have to consider is when we start to feel like the mission of the nonprofit isn't aligned with what we're hearing. And what I mean is the ego of the executive director or the team that's running it gets in the way of self. I know self rises above mission is the best way to say it.
Yeah.
And that causes us to say, wait a minute, this isn't for the greater good. It forces us to step back, reposition, redirect, sit down virtually and decide whether we want to continue down that road, because part of the nonprofit thinking is the mission trumps everything. And we can say that because we've been so deeply involved, when it doesn't.
Right.
So, but it's veering off track a little bit, but then we have to reposition and we have to be prepared to pull back and say, well, we misjudged this nonprofit. We thought they were better. That is not an attack on nonprofits. That's just a small cross section that we bumped into. They're well-intentioned, and sometimes they don't even realize it, that the ego is driving what they're doing versus what's good for the good of the mission.
Right. They're still being run by human beings,
Yes, and they're trying hard, but, human nature takes over sometimes. And quite frankly, many of them will step back and say, kind of like, whoops. And
Nice.
How can you help us? Good Works 360, which is our other, how can you help us get back on track ourselves?
Nice.
Some of them won't. They won't change. So we've got to pull back and say we need to redirect that limited amount of resources to another nonprofit that's on the waiting list.
That's great. So what I hear you saying in that is when you find yourself, maybe a little misaligned with the work you want to be doing and what that organization is doing, when you find that, you pause and then you take action.
Yep.
You don't just keep kind of going along unconsciously. I know this isn't good for me. I know this isn't really aligned, but we're in it. We should go along.
And don't let our ego become the problem, saying, well, we don't want to look like we made a bad decision.
Right. We don't want to look like we made a decision. We don't want to upset them. We don't want to, none of that. So when you see there's misalignment, that you're maybe not living consciously, or your current actions with this organization aren't exactly what you want it to be, it's gone unconscious in some way on their end, you pause and then take action to bring yourself back into alignment. Maybe it's just communicating something that then shifts their actions, or maybe it's pulling back and going in a different direction.
Yep.
Wonderful. Again, there's such lessons in that for everyone, because we all, because we are in this human experience, right? So we all end up in situations, sometimes internal, sometimes in relationship, where we've gone unconscious. We're not living as consciously as we want to, or we're in relationship with someone who's not as conscious as we want to be. And so it's good to take that advice of pause.
We've just learned, Jackie, that it really does, and there's a lot of people that can be quoted on this, but it really does take so little to do so much for so many if you're focused on it and you're sincere and you're authentic. And it's the power to really have what we call positive ripples of change come from what we're doing. And it's just an amazing feeling when they say, you get more back than you give. That is true. We have felt that time and time again.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Dennis, I know there's going to be authors listening to this and coaches. If people want to be contributors on any of your platforms, how do they get in touch with you or reach out?
The best thing they can do is start by understanding what you were trying to understand. What is 360 Nation? Because that'll lead you to everything else. If they just go to bizcatalyst360.com/360 Nation, that'll take you right to who we are, what we do, why we do it, and everything else I just talked about goes through that funnel.
That's fantastic. I hope that lots more conscious people get in touch with you. And if people just want to read your blog, where do they find that?
Same place. Start there.
Bizcatalyst.com.
Bizcatalyst360.com, but they can come through 360 Nation again, because everything is on that page.
Okay, great. I love being a contributor to what you're doing. Please
thanks, Jackie.
Tap me in any time for the things that you're up to. And I can't thank you enough for being a part of the Conscious Living.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.